Late Night Hoops is back for the 24-25 season. First time we have to do these late night games. We have 3 this week. It's our debut on the late night games as the Sixers, the 1-4 Sixers, take on the 5-1 Phoenix Suns, Clippers and Lakers later on this week. And as we speak about debuts for us for the late night shows, a debut for one Paul George as well. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers pregame show here. And again, welcome to the pregame show presented by Coors Light. Visit CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball to get Coors Light delivered or find a store near you. Along with Derek Bodner, Kyle Newbeck, I'm Devon Givens. Bree is here, everybody. Of course, all of you in the chat. Big game tonight. Busy last few days for Kyle and Derek. And we have a lot to check in on with Joel Embiid. We'll talk about the keys to the game in this matchup. Again, Phoenix is 5-1. They're off to a very good start with Mike Budenholzer as the head coach. Kyle's guy, Tyus Jones, running the point. And things really are coming together for the Phoenix Suns. So it is going to be a tough matchup for the Sixers to start things off here tonight. We'll get into our Bet365 picks a little bit later on as well. But, Derek, we finally get it. We get one piece of the 2/3 of the puzzle there, the pieces there for the puzzle with Paul George coming back. Minute restrictions, it looks like. But, Derek, we get Paul George playing basketball tonight.
And, boy, it couldn't have come at a better time. Not only because the Sixers are sitting here at 1-4, but, boy, are the vibes #not great. No, look, it's starting to slowly feel like Sixers basketball and not nonsense basketball. Like I said, it came at a fantastic time. It came at a time when they are hitting a real rough stretch of the schedule after blowing some really winnable games early on in the season. 3 of their losses to the Bucks, to the Raptors, and the Pistons, those teams are combined 2-15 against the rest of the NBA. So the Sixers have not been performing up to task and getting a little bit of offensive firepower for what I think is the 27th or 28th ranked offense in the league. Like I said, could not have possibly come at a better time. The Sixers desperately need this one.
Yeah, so I don't want to get into the betting stuff quite yet, obviously, because we have our segment later. But in our Discord today, there was some chatter about would you take over or under on Paul George points? And I believe the line's at 17.5. Maybe we'll get there at some point. Maybe Gambling Givens will weigh in on this, but my thought process as I was talking through it was, normally you'd say guy's first game back, he eases into it. And we've heard from Paul George, right? He doesn't want to come in and overwhelm anybody. He doesn't want to dominate the ball necessarily. But when you look at how they played, it's like, if you're Paul George, you're probably coming into this game like, oh, I'm getting them up, baby. I'm firing away. Like, this is not a team that we can afford the passive Paul, right? The guy who just kind of hangs out on the perimeter, who checks out for periods of the game and allows the other stars to do their thing. He's got to be assertive and he's got to be aggressive basically right from the get-go. And, from the sound of things, while he's on a minute restriction, it doesn't seem like it's a really tight one, right? Like Nick Nurse alluded to the fact that it's going to have to be just like keeping in touch with them. How you doing? Keeping maybe the shifts down rather than the total number. So I'm really excited to see him out there tonight. I'm really excited to finally see the 3 wings out there together, especially because this is the most important one. He's the guy that makes it all work, that adds the floor spacing, that provides a second option in spacing for Tyrese Maxey. So yes, to Derek's point, we have graduated from post-preseason basketball to semi-regular season basketball. And once the big fella gets back, we will have everything, and it'll be real basketball for sure. But I'm pretty pumped up for this one. We'll see if I regret those words in a couple hours when they're down by 10 at halftime. And we're like, God, we still have another hour and 20 minutes until we go live again.
Yeah.
I mean, it is coming against a pretty good Phoenix team who's 5-1 with some pretty quality wins in their schedule so far. So certainly this is not a guaranteed victory by any stretch, but yeah, it is good just to get some sense of normalcy. If for no other reason, it could get him back up to game speed a little bit and maybe let Nick start settling in on some rotation.
So we were calling him Derek after the game, me, you, and Jack and Kyle. I know you were busy in the locker room handling everything, but we were calling this team, as you said, we're still stuck in the preseason, which we were, but we were also calling this team a lottery team because of what the roster looked like. He significantly, even just his presence of however many minutes Nick Nurse decides that he and Paul George agree on how many minutes he can play, we get to actually see a real basketball team, see how their offense runs, get Tyrese Maxey some help. Not to mention, when you say finally, both of you say we're finally excited to see him. We didn't get a chance to see him against the Atlanta Hawks. We only saw those highlights really in that game, and then he gets hurt, he goes off the floor, and all of it. So we only get a chance to see a little bit of him in that one. So now, even though he didn't play a lot of minutes in that one in the first half before the injury occurred, getting the opportunity to see him tonight, taking some of that pressure off of Tyrese Maxey, and also giving the rest of the players a chance to really fall back into their level of play for who they are, for what their roles are in this basketball team. Now, you're still missing a big piece with Joel Embiid. Andre Drummond, though, is in the starting lineup. So you do get 4 of your 5 potential starters that we thought would be at the start of the season. We finally get a chance to see them all together. And to do that against a team with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Grayson Allen coming off the bench, and seeing how that goes, it's going to be really fun to see how he reacts to everything playing on that knee. See if he's moving and cutting and all of those things, and how he looks on the defensive end as well, because they're going to rely on him too. He may get the lesser of the wings to start things off because he is easing back. But Kyle, as you said, when you get back out there, you just want to get jump started. You want to get into it in that first quarter. So depending on how many minutes he plays, does he get going early? Does he get hot? Does he potentially get a steal or rebound that makes him feel good with the defensive assignment, a defensive possession that he really played well, felt good on that knee, and then he starts to ease into it. And this is where we are going to be tonight for this one as they start off this 3-game road trip. And before we get started a little bit more with everything, I want to tell everybody to make sure that they go read the stories that Derek put up today, Kyle put up on Sunday morning about everything from Joel Embiid to the team right now with where they are. Do so at allphly.com and make sure you go sign up, because we only have a few hours left, just over 2 hours left to sign up for our intro offer of $48 right now. Limited time intro offer, $48 right now for allphly.com. You can get a cool PHLY Sixers shirt, a t-shirt to represent our show. You can maybe get once you get comfortable with the shirt, look at the locker room. You can see the hat that Derek has on there. You can go buy one of those. But to sign up, you can get a free t-shirt to go along with it. The Discord, the PHLY Lounge, to have the discussions with everybody in there. Part of the community, all there in the Discord. Sign up, $48, only 2 hours left. And by the way, almost 1,500 new diehards. Well, just probably at this point, maybe over 1,500 new diehards that have taken advantage of this lowest price. So go sign up, become a diehard member, have an opportunity to read the stories that both Derek and Kyle put up over the last 2 days on the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah. And look, there's a good Discord community in there. Like, we're up over 1,000 Discord members in there, just there to talk Philly sports. It's a nice, calm, respectful, especially when Vince isn't a part of it. It's just a real good place to hang out and talk. So that is a big part of, I think, the value prop as well.
Absolutely. Well, back to Paul George for a second. One of the big things that I am interested in tonight, and really just in the opening, we'll call it 5, 6, 7 minutes, is how much does Nick Nurse put the ball in his hands and say, you're bringing the ball up the floor and you're initiating? Because I think one thing we've seen quite a bit of early on is Caleb Martin getting that type of responsibility.
And even Kelly, who still doesn't know how to pass, but is bringing the ball up.
Yeah, and Caleb is getting it in a lot of cases as, getting it from the inbounder, and Maxey is getting set up, whether it's on the wing or fully down in the corner, where they can have him coming off some pin downs or some other actions. And now that you have Paul George, you can do things like that. And if they overplay to chase Maxey and to stop Maxey, you feel good about Paul George's ability to go and find his own shot, get to the rim, score at the rim, hit a mid-range shot, even hit a pull-up three if he's against the dropping big. And, considering Markic is the main guy there in Phoenix, that's a guy that potentially you can take advantage of in space, whether it's Tyrese or Paul. So I want to see. Paul has been inconsistent over the years of exactly how he says he wants to be used, right? Like there have been times where he does want the ball more in his hands. And then I guess when it goes wrong, it's like, well, I'm more of an off-ball guy, right? So I want to see where Nick lands on this and how much responsibility Paul's going to get right out the chute coming off of the injury. That's going to be a nice early test of, I guess how Nick Nurse sees things on the Joel Embiid off nights when he has both the other stars.
Yeah, and look, Nick has tried relatively hard here to get Tyrese some off-ball opportunities. Like Kyle mentioned, he's letting Caleb bring the ball up. He's letting Kelly bring the ball up. Obviously, Lowry, when he was playing alongside him, was bringing the ball up. And for the most part, it hasn't really worked. I wrote earlier today, again, all PHLY.com, diehard offer is still up there, but Tyrese is getting about half of the catch and shoot threes he normally gets, usually about an equal 50-50 split or off the dribble versus off the catch. This year, it is down to about 25% off the catch, and it's quite clear there's just nobody who can create an advantage and make a pass to him to get him open. He can run off screens as much as he wants. If nobody else is really a threat, they're going to, defend him, top lock him really closely. So it is something where he's been desperate to get Tyrese some easier looks because Tyrese is struggling from the perimeter. It hasn't really worked, in part because they just don't really have the skill set or the talent around him to make that work. Yeah, I think the ball is going to be in his hands quite a bit. It is a little bit where Paul, I'm sure, wants to ease in a little bit, not take any shots away. But then again, you're taking shots away from Caleb Martin and Kelly Oubre. You're going to have to get past that pretty quickly because they desperately need his offense. Desperately.
The amount of shots that Tyrese Maxey is putting up, it's okay if Paul George decides he wants to take some of those shots away from those other guys as well and get things going. Because look, the way that they have been loading up on Tyrese Maxey, and he's still getting 20 plus shots up a night. Yeah, think about how that is now going to start to fall off a little bit and go to Paul George in this scenario. Build it up over these next couple of games, Charlotte on Sunday, and get into the schedule next week and see how it goes. But I too, I think we're all here together on this one of how is this going to look with him with the ball in his hands, initiating the offense, not only for himself, but also to free up Tyrese Maxey to do those things with the catch and shoot threes, Derek, that you talked about, with some of that the curls and things that will now get Tyrese Maxey on the move, Kyle, to get to the basket, catching it on the move, put the ball down, and get to the basket. And maybe that'll also help out with his assist there to find Andre Drummond closer to the rim, make it a little bit easier for him. And then those catch and shoot opportunities for Caleb Martin and Kelly Oubre might seem a little bit easier with the defense shuffling to get back to them to close out hard, to not allow them to get off some easy buckets. They put the ball on the floor and do what they need to do. So we finally get to see the basketball team together, and it's going to be good to see these guys out there. We get a real basketball team on the floor tonight playing against another real basketball team in those Phoenix Suns. As we talk so much about Paul George, as we should, making his Sixers debut during the regular season, we also have to talk about, just because Kyle has been really busy over the weekend with all the Joel Embiid news that took place.
Do we get to brag about a TV appearance if they ended up cutting the TV appearance?
Yeah, if they didn't actually have me on eventually. We recorded it. And
I was up, and I'm like, I'm telling everybody, and Mom is up, and, Jack was like, oh, I was up, but I think I missed Kyle. I'm like, I was up too. Yeah, but.
Yeah, for the listeners at home, I got contacted yesterday by, of all places, Good Morning America reached out to me and said, hey, we'd like to talk to you about this Joel Embiid story. And so their producers were very nice. I put on a nice shirt and get on a Zoom with a woman named Suzanne, who's one of their producers over there. She asked me a bunch of questions. I was like, hey, here's the time slot you'll be in. And then overnight, one of the greatest music producers, maybe you could argue the greatest music producer in history, Quincy Jones, passed away. Yep. Rest his soul, obviously. And that ended up taking, the segment that they built out for him took that slot that otherwise would have been me and Joel Embiid. So look, it's easy to be bitter, right? But that's the news, right? I got preempted by a bigger story and a bigger name. It happens. But my chance to be on Good Morning America was snatched away.
Well, look, when PHLY is the biggest sports company in the world and they come reaching out, we're going to remember that snub. We're not forgetting.
You're in the Rolodex now, man. It's
I was going to say, if there's another Sixers story and they don't come to me, then I'll come on here and talk some trash. But I mean, I get it. It's just a bizarre situation that Joel and Marcus's situation has gone from, kind of our local news to, hey, this is a gigantic story that a lot of people are talking about, that a lot of people are also now waiting to see whatever the repercussions will be from this.
Yeah, so right away we'll start off because we are in good terms right now with Good Morning America, which we should be going for. What up, Suze? Thanks for reaching out to Kyle. We appreciate it. Next time, get him on, though. Rest in peace to Quincy Jones. But, yeah, I mean, the story has really taken on a big-time life of its own over the last couple of days. That's why we wanted to make sure that everybody knew to go ahead and read Kyle's piece at allphly.com, where you can still sign up for that $48 offer. Read Derek's stories on his 5 thoughts that he has so far through the first 5 games of the season. But so much Derek has taken on with this conversation about Joel Embiid, not just, as you mentioned, from PHLY and the local stuff, Associated Press that night. You guys had shared with the team here, and then just everywhere else where I'm seeing other people talk about it. It became really a big deal, Derek.
Yeah, it did. And look, I don't really want to react too harshly until we get the details of the NBA's investigation, in part because there have just been some conflicting reports on what actually transpired. Was it just a light push? Was it a shove? I consider those things two pretty different things. Intent, I think, is pretty important. I do think the NBA will end up coming down in some regard just because of the precedent that it sets. I would be surprised if he skated away with no suspension at all. But, in terms of kind of litigating the morality of it and how wrong I think Joel was, it's really hard until we actually know some of the details. I will say, if a 7-foot guy wanted Marcus on the floor, Marcus probably would have been on the floor. I do think the way it was covered and initially being reported as a punch did a lot of damage just to the reputation of Joel, and amplified the story to a huge degree. But it would be a huge degree even if it was just a push or even a shove. I think this was something that was going to, reverberate around the NBA Twitter sphere and media landscape quite quickly. This is something that is virtually unprecedented. I think Joel's going to catch some flack for it. I think Marcus is going to catch some flack for it. And I think it was a failure pretty much all the way around.
Yeah, it was very interesting being about 6 inches to a foot.
I still can't
Joel
believe Rich missed that show, man. I'm going to hold that against him for the rest of his career.
It was, because I was legitimately standing next to Tyrese during the whole thing. And half the time I'm just looking over at him and he's making goofy faces and sending texts to people oh, Joel,
Tyrese seems like a joke his way through the situation kind of guy.
Yeah. And look, he's always got a smile on his face, so that's not a big surprise. Yeah, I'm of two minds on what's going to happen on this, as I was talking to you guys about prior to the show starting, where I feel like the league on one hand can't not do anything because they have to set some sort of precedent here that in situations where a player puts their hand on a hand or hands or what plural on a member of the media or anyone for that matter, right? It could be a fan, it could be a random person. There have to be repercussions. But I think given the nature of the issue between them, given everything that we heard from Joel directly, that this is not about being criticized for basketball, right? This is not about Joel's fitness. This is not about whether he can lead a team in the playoffs. He viewed this as a story about his family and a problem about his family. And I think if you give him a heavy-handed punishment, I think not only would the Sixers react poorly, I think players around the league would not take that well, given the broader reaction here is actually probably the thing I'm most surprised by. There's been very little debate amongst people that I've seen about Joel's conduct here, because everyone takes a step back from, this is my job, this is your job. We all have our labels and titles, and they say, you're supporting or you're protecting your family name. You're protecting people you love. You're standing up for people you love. And it has become almost a universal support of Joel, even from people and fan bases that normally are like, screw that guy, can't stand him. So that part's been really interesting. I was not prepared for that. With everything Joel, I'm always expecting, and with everything on the internet, right? It's the embrace debate era where we turn everything into a two sides conversation. So really all that's left to settle now are the particulars of the NBA investigation and ultimately whatever Adam Silver and company decide to do.
I've been really surprised by the amount of positive feedback in Joel's favor, if you will, at least based on the initial part of it for right now around the country, not just around here, but around the country, where people had the opportunity to go read the initial story, the very first story, and then the second one, and saying, you know what, in this case, Joel Embiid was not wrong. So I was really surprised because of Joel's reputation around the sports world, not just the NBA, but around the sports world, and how people really view him. And after a tough summer where it felt like he shouldn't play for Team USA, the whole thing with France and their fans and so on and so forth, where it has now come back more on the positive side for Joel. But once again, we have to wait to find out what the NBA investigation turns up. They would just find $100,000 for the information or lack thereof of Joel's availability with his injury and being transparent about things. Now we'll see how this one ultimately plays out. But everybody has a thought and opinion on this one when it comes to Embiid and Marcus in this case.
Yeah, you know how I know that's true? You know who liked my story?
Who's that?
Gabrielle Union was apparently invested in this. There was, because I'm scrolling through all the.
Hey, she can join the PHLY Discord. Come on in.
Come on in,
Gabby Union, big fan. Obviously, love your work, all that. Think you're building a great family with Dwayne. We'd love to have you in the PHLY Discord, so feel free to stop by anytime and say hello and talk hoops with all of us.
Absolutely. Everybody knows where to go to come check out the PHLY Sixers podcast. Check out the news right here. Make sure you follow on Twitter at PHLY _Sixers to follow our Twitter account to get the updates on a lot of things, the videos that the guys put up from practice and the games. And of course, the stories being filed when our show gets started. Make sure you do that, like and subscribe, and follow us on Twitter at PHLY _Sixers. All right, we do have the starters. Let's get to the starters tonight. Paul George is active tonight, so with him being active, got to start him, right? Got to put him in the starting lineup, and that is the case. Paul George in the starting lineup, along with Tyrese Maxey, Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre, and Andre Drummond. The first time that we get to see the three wings with the all-star point guard and a big man, in this case, Andre Drummond. Of course, we do like Andre Drummond and see how he performs out there with this one. But guys, we finally get a chance to see it. We expect Paul George to start right away, but that just kind of puts us right into the keys to the game for us, where we would like to begin. Kyle, keys to the game for you for this one against the 5-1 Phoenix Suns.
Gotta make threes. It's the only way this team has a chance to win games without Joel Embiid is they have to get better from the 3-point line, right? And they had a better night the other night. They got a lot up. It's got to be a combination of overall increased volume, overall increased efficiency. And Paul should change a lot of that by himself, right? Like he's a walking 8 to 9 threes per game, 40% type shooter. Now that's in maybe closer to an ideal environment where you're having him play off of Joel Embiid and he's going to see very hard closeouts. How he reacts to those is key. But I just want to see them generate a lot of threes and I want to see them make a lot of them. And I think the good thing about where they're at now that PG is back, you brought up Kyle Lowry earlier. Well, now he can play that 10 to 15 minute a game role as the backup point guard and he's not being overextended as someone who's got to play next to Maxey, someone who's got to run offense, someone who in a late clock situation was pretty frequently being asked, like, hey, go make something happen. And then he's getting blocked on a fadeaway free throw line jumper. It's like, that's just not a good place for him to be in. So the fact that Kyle can slide into a natural role. What were you going to say there?
I love the optimism you have that Nick Nurse isn't going to turn to his 39-year-old security blanket more than you want.
Listen, I'm trying to be optimistic about that. But yeah, so I think the lineup will probably create more shots just naturally, right? I don't think they'll even have to really run anything much differently. It'll just be defense will pay more attention to Paul. Tyrese will get some more open catch and shoot threes. The other guys will get some more open shots. It's just a matter of knocking them down. And shooting is weird at the pro level, right? Like these guys, you put them in an empty gym, will all probably make 70+% of every jumper that they get up. And if you can get them on in this setting, get one good game under your belt as a team, the lid can be blown off. And that might turn into 3 games, 4 games, 5 games where they all shoot well as a group. And that gives you some momentum. That gives you some, offensive sustainability without Joel Embiid, that hopefully that's enough to get some wins without him.
And sort of like tied to taking and making threes, which I agree. Not shooting 31% from 3 would make basketball so much more watchable, and I'm greatly looking forward to that. I'm actually surprised they're 20th in 3-point attempt rate. I thought they would be lower than that. Which, look, 20th isn't a lot, but considering who they have on the roster, that's more than I was expecting. But what comes along with actually taking and making threes is having a little bit of extra space on the drives, too. Again, one of the numbers I dove into in my column today, allphly.com, what a website, is Kelly Oubre is shooting about 34% on drives. Caleb Martin is shooting 35%. Part of that is that they are being overtaxed as shot creators. Paul George will help that. He'll slide all of them down a peg. But part of that is also that there's just not space because nobody's concerned about the perimeter shot. So everyone's able to dig down on those drives and create a crowd. Paul George will also help with that. So in addition to making some threes, hopefully these guys who have been masquerading as second and third options, now going down to third or fourth options with a little bit more space, hopefully will be a little more effective at what they're trying to do, because the Sixers as a team are shooting like 40% on drives to the basket, which would be the worst percentage on drives. It's yuck. Yes, it would be the worst percentage of drives in like 15 years. It's awful. It's horrendous. It's not sustainable. And they need something to kickstart them. And I think Paul George being in the lineup, taking some of that shot creation burden and spreading the floor should give them a little bit of a kick.
All right. Let's get to our great pick segment here. Kyle talked about it. He teed it up a little bit early. This
Gambling
pick
Gibbons
is brought to you by Bet365. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Let's run with those picks there from the pick segment. Look at that, Kyle. Where did I go with the over?
Look at that, taking the over. Hey,
17 and a half, 2+ threes made. You can get that at -105. I was a little nervous because of the minute restriction, but I said, you know what? I'm going to go with it. Over 17 and a half for Paul George. Nothing too crazy, but it'll make an impact on the game overall. So that's over 17 and a half, 2+ threes made on the game, -105. Folks, how do you feel about that one? Jump on in. First quarter assists. Tyrese Maxey over 1.5 at -170, simply because while he may not have the ball in his hands as much, he's going to be able to drive and kick and maybe do a few other things with the presence of Paul George. How do you guys feel about that one?
I think I would probably bet the exact opposite on all of those, not because there's not any logic.
Wow.
But because your track record of late has not been.
We're still in the preseason. Now we're in the regular season, Derek.
I'm riding with Gambling Gibbons. Let's go.
That's right. I appreciate that, Kyle. I appreciate that. And one last one that we do have, rebounds for Caleb Martin, over under 4.5 at -110. You know he can get active on the glass, help out a little bit. We know Andre Drummond could also snatch a few boards for the 76ers and take away from some of the others. But Caleb Martin over 4.5 in the starting role here with the rest of the Sixers. And that, again, is our Bet365, our pregame pick segment, brought to you by Bet365. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 plus and physically located in Pennsylvania. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, fellas, any predictions on the way out?
Start exactly on time. So
there you go. So let's get ready to get out of here. Just now tipping off. Folks, we got to say goodbye. We'll be back after the game. We'll talk to you then. And again, our show here, pregame show, presented by Coors Light. Visit CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball. Light delivered, or find a store near you. For Derek, Kyle, and Bree, I'm Devon. We'll be back after the game. Late night hoops, everybody. You might as well stay up. We'll talk to you after the game. See you then.
See ya.
We all silly like the mayor.